Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the February 2024 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook and discussion of Fascism in the United States by Earl Browder from 1923. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or buy me a coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. So recently we started a new mini-series on the channel concerning first-wave US anti-revisionism, which was directed against the phenomenon known as Browderism, so named for Earl Browder, General Secretary of the Communist Party of the US, also known as CPUSA, and the author of the piece in this video. So if this mini-series is about anti-Browderism, you might be wondering, why are we reading something from Browder? Well, this miniseries basically has three components, at least at the outset, as I've planned it so far. The sort of backbone of it is a book called Marxism, Leninism versus Revisionism, which collects a number of essays and speeches by William Z. Foster and others who fought against Browderism. This piece, Fascism in the United States, and the others which are listed on the screen, of which Browder was either an author or co-author, are what I would call the second component of this, which is getting a closer look at the revisionist policies, which were the focus of this anti-revisionist struggle. Specifically, the first four, Fascism in the United States, the Campaign for Class Collaboration, the Economics of Class Collaboration, and More Class Collaboration Bunk, are included to demonstrate that once upon a time Earl Browder actually did know his Marxism. And then later, in The Future of the Anglo-Soviet American Coalition, Tehran and America, Perspectives and Tasks, Shall the Communist Party Change Its Name?, which also includes essays from Eugene Dennis and John Williamson, we'll get to them in a second, and The Road Ahead to Victory and Lasting Peace, from about 20 years later. Well, those are the revisionist pieces, which include major pitches for class collaboration, the very same thing that he was writing against 20 years prior. So what the hell happened? Well, I'm not sure if we're going to know in detail exactly why Earl Browder, the specific individual, took this particular turn. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but I think it is instructive to see where he used to be and then where he ended up. So that's the second component of this mini-series. The third component, I guess you could say, hinges on the inclusion of John Williamson and Eugene Dennis, appearing both in Shall the Communist Party Change Its Name, alongside Browder echoing and championing this line, and then later, but not much later, appearing in Marxism, Leninism versus Revisionism on the anti-Browder side. In other words, when the CPUSA was reconstituted to rid itself of Browderism, it did expel Browder, but then it was reconstituted by some of the same people that had previously been by Browder's side. So the third component would be readings from, I guess you could say, skeptics of the reconstitution of CPUSA, who accused the reconstituted party of practicing Browderism without Browder. In other words, they got rid of the guy and they made a big show of it, but the party was reconstituted by some of the same people who had put these policies into effect. And while there were formal statements against some of the revisionist errors, maybe the changes and corrections didn't actually run so deep. So we'll take a look at all that and see what we come up with. For now, we're going to do this piece and then the next piece, the 3 articles on class collaboration, and then we'll go from there. So let's begin. Fascism, as a well-defined institution, has not appeared in the American class struggle as yet. Comment, remember this was 1923. Continuing, the basic reason for this is that in spite of the bitterness of the class struggle, there has not been a far-reaching and fundamental crisis in the capitalist system. American capitalism is still lusty and strong, it still feels the blood of youth coursing through its veins, its productive powers are still on the increase. The labor movement generally is still completely dominated by a bureaucracy without the faintest traces of class consciousness. The ideology of the trade union movement is shot through and through with bourgeois influence. Its economics is capitalistic, its philosophy is at best middle-class liberalism. Subjectively, it presents not the slightest menace to capitalism. The objective strength of capitalism, coupled with the objective weakness of the labor movement, renders impossible at this time such a crisis as would bring into existence a well-organized and militant fascist movement at all comparable to the classic bands of Mussolini. But if the fascist menace is as yet vague and diffused in America, it's still very real. The roots of fascism are embedded deep in the soil of American life, and today, under the stimulation of the example of triumphant Mussolini, they begin to push through the soil in many places. Branches of Mussolini's own party are formed among the Italian immigrant population of America. The Ku Klux Klan is flourishing, especially in the South and Midwest, and from its strongholds, the backward agrarian districts, it's reaching into the middle-class circles of the cities. The American Legion, ex-servicemen under the leadership of bourgeois ex-officers, is still a powerful exponent of fascist ideology, in spite of the things that have somewhat retarded its development in that direction. The Minutemen of the Constitution, the latest comer in the field of budding fascist organizations, bids fair to become a militant anti-labor band of picked members of the bourgeoisie. Fascism is taking up a very real position. It's becoming more aggressive. It's adopting the devious methods and tactics necessary to adjust itself to national and local peculiarities, and bids fair to challenge the labor movement even before any revolutionary developments have shaken American society. The counter-revolution in this country is organizing its forces far in advance of the revolution. In spite of all that has been written about the fascisti, the workers of America have no clear idea of what it means to the labor movement. The capitalist class has no trouble in recognizing fascism, in Italy and at home alike, as its friend. Judge Gary of the Steel Trust visited Mussolini in 1923 and came back to praise him and his work. The labor movement is more hesitating. Regarding the direct branches of Mussolini's party, it has been forced to take a stand against it. Due to the strenuous counter-activity of the unions with a large Italian membership, particularly the garment trades of New York City, and through them the Central Trades and Labor Council, the Anti-Fascist Alliance was formed, largely under the inspiration and direction of the Communists. The Anti-Fascist Alliance has carried on a propaganda that has neutralized the Fascist Party in America, and has placed the American labor movement on record against fascism. But this has not meant action against the fascist movement of American origin and American trademark. The American Legion, composed of ex-servicemen, founded and led by ex-officers of the American Expeditionary Force in France, has developed along the well-known fascist lines. In countless towns and cities, it has accumulated a record of strike-breaking activities and general violence against the labor and revolutionary movements, which has made it hated in labor circles. Its spiritual kinship with the fascisti of Italy was dramatically expressed when it invited Mussolini to be its guest at the San Francisco Convention of the Legion, October 1923. With a keen appreciation of the tactics of Mussolini, the American Legion modified its attitude toward the trade unions early in its career, and it adopted the policy of boring from within. In spite of the handicap of bitterness against it among the rank and file, it soon registered results with this policy, and at the Cincinnati Convention of the AFL, June 1922, an open alliance was proclaimed between the Legion and the Gompers bureaucracy. Comment, the AFL was always the most reactionary trade federation, even helping to break other unions' strikes through a practice known as union scabbing. It's things like this that led more radical unionists to nickname it the AF of Hell. Continuing. Now, a year later, posts of the Legion are being formed within the unions themselves. To those familiar with the development of fascist trade unions in Europe, it will be readily seen that the basis for repeating the history of Italian labor is being laid in America. The trade union bureaucrats have a natural affinity for fascist ideology, and when the time comes for the real Fascist Party of America, they will no doubt furnish much of its leadership, as have their counterparts in Europe. If Mussolini had been able to attend the Legion convention, we might have had the sublime spectacle of Samuel Gompers and Benito the Dictator speaking together from the same platform. It would have symbolized the growing power of fascism within the labor movement of this country. Another fascist organization, the Minutemen of the Constitution, was organized only this year, 1923. It is led by Brigadier General Charles G. Dawes, who is, in addition to his military honors, an ex-budget expert in the Harding administration and a banker connected with the Central Trust Company of Chicago. The Minutemen is more of a picked body than the Legion. The latter, although led entirely by bourgeois elements, overall has more of a mass character. The Legion was hindered in its development as a complete fascist body by this fact. To retain its mass following, it was forced to make some show of fighting for the soldiers' bonus, in which the Legion found itself in opposition to the ruling capitalist clique. Comment, look up the history of the bonus army demonstration for more. Continuing, the class-conscious bourgeoisie saw that the Legion had its limitations as a fascist instrument, and this was undoubtedly one of the considerations that led to the formation of the Minutemen, openly and frankly an adjunct of the open shop forces, militantly anti-labor and aspiring to the role of shock troops in the counter-revolution. It is too early to say whether it will achieve this ambition or not. Comment, what are the open shop forces? Well, a closed shop is a workplace in which, in order to work there, a worker has to join the union. Now, there could be some problems with this if the union was discriminatory, for example. So then any workers that the union was discriminating against wouldn't be able to get a job there because, again, you had to go through the union. So the closed shop did make the union stronger, but the union had to be inclusive. This is why the more radical unions, like the IWW, would use slogans like a closed shop and an open union. Now, after World War II, with the Taft-Hartley Anti-Labor Act, the closed shop was outlawed federally. This was timed with the beginning of the Cold War and McCarthyism, the Second Red Scare, and the results were that one of the more radical labor federations, the CIO, was drained of membership because so many people were accused of being communists in it that it basically got absorbed into the AFL just a few years later, 1955, into the AFL-CIO configuration that exists today. Probably also not coincidentally, the labor movement peaked just a few years after that at about 1960, with about 30% of the private sector being unionized, and then it basically went into like a 60-year decline, ending up with around 7 or 8% of the private sector being unionized, and then starting to bounce back a little bit just in the last few years. Continuing. If the American Legion and the Minutemen of the Constitution show us two faces of the fascist movement in America, particularly its crystallization among the ex-soldiers and within the labor unions, the Ku Klux Klan presents a phase not less important and differing in many aspects. The KKK is the most active, 100% American, and at the same time the most typical expression of fascism in this country. It has its origin and its stronghold in the agricultural districts. It is sweeping hundreds of thousands of the agrarian population into its folds, and is now gathering in the clerks, petty officials, middle-class elements, and municipal employees, especially through the Midwestern states, and is achieving some success among the isolated communities of workers, such as the coal miners. Along with its spectacular organizational expansion, it has become a belligerent and noisy, even if hooded and secret, factor in political life. It is making a bold bid for power in many communities. Nominally, the KKK is a centralized organization, but actually it centralizes little but the sale of robes, etc. Even in this field, the economic exploitation of the ignorant yokels making up its membership, the KKK has had several secessions and splits, and there are now several competing bodies, which are carrying on litigation against one another in the courts. It is actually decentralized in action and practical policies, taking on the most conflicting aspects in the various localities. In one community, it may be militantly prohibitionist, its marauding masked bands flogging and mutilating bootleggers, illegal vendors of liquor, while in another neighboring center, the same white-hooded costume hides the face of violators of the prohibition law, and violence is turned against the federal enforcers of the Volstead Act. It may, in one locality, be an instrument of small producers and tenants trying to control the market for cotton and tobacco, and nearby it may simultaneously be carrying on violent suppressions of tenant and farm labor movements. In its methods, it is typically fascist, except for the notorious white robe and hood. This mask is in contrast to the bold and open violence, the boast of the fascisti in Italy. Comment, another really important aspect of the KKK is that historically it overlapped significantly with the police. The saying, cops and Klan go hand in hand, is historical fact. There's a really good and detailed, if somewhat dry, account of this in a book called Our Enemies in Blue, A History of Police. I recommend that. Continuing, there is conflict on the surface, without ever becoming a serious struggle, between the various fascist bodies. Thus, the Gompers' bureaucracy in the trade unions, while adopting the American Legion, condemns the fascisti and the KKK. Many sections of the Legion are publicly against the Klan. Sections of the labor movement are opposed to the Legion, in spite of Gompers' approval of it. All sorts of local antagonisms exist, but all of these budding fascist organizations go to the same roots, and a fundamental harmony exists between them. This is even being demonstrated quite publicly. The commander of the Legion, Owsley, praises Mussolini and threatens that the Legion will follow in his footsteps. The American Legion invites Mussolini to its convention. Gompers and his family condemn Mussolini, but that does not interfere with the closest alliance between the Legion and the AFL bureaucracy, and Gompers speaks from the same platform to which Mussolini has been invited. Judge Gary endorses Mussolini, the Legion endorses Mussolini. Gompers endorses the Legion and brings it into the labor movement. The American Legion Convention refuses to condemn the Klan 1 week after Gompers condemns it, but through all the maneuvers, a greater solidarity is exhibited among the aristocracy, the leading spirits of all these aspiring fascisti. The Red Menace is being used to fuse them together, and when a revolutionary situation develops, they will doubtless be united. The bureaucracy of the American Federation of Labor is playing a role in the development of fascism that is continuously growing more important. In addition to the alliances with organizations of a fundamentally fascist nature, it is also developing internally along the typical fascist lines, more openly and defiantly than even d'Aragona in Italy. At the October 1923 convention of the AFL in Portland, the fundamental program of the Gompers machine was enunciated by Major George L. Berry, president of the Pressmen's Union and prominent American Legionist, as follows, quote, "We of the American Federation of Labor stand for 4 great principles governing industry. These are the ownership of property, an adequate return on investments, an adequate return allowed industry for the matter of deterioration, and that all workers, including managers, get proper compensation for what they put into industry." Unquote. On this basis, the Gompers family appeal for a united front with the employing class against the growing unrest of the rank and file of labor. The employers have greeted the move with great enthusiasm. Such labor-hating organs of capitalism as the Chicago Tribune and the Journal of Commerce promptly endorsed it. The officials of the United Mine Workers Union, at the conclusion of a series of articles proclaiming a red menace, said, quote, "It is a situation that challenges not only organized labor, but every employer as well. This is one occasion when labor and the employer might very well join hands and fight together instead of fighting with each other." Unquote. Just as the renegades and reformists in the Italian labor movement gave leadership and service to the fascisti in the persons of Mussolini, Rossoni, and their kind. Comment, yes, Mussolini used to be a socialist, however, then he got on MI5's payroll and started beating up anti-war protesters in World War I. Continuing. So we have every reason to believe the American bureaucrats and reformists will furnish much of the real fascist leadership in the American class struggle. There can be no other meaning to the alliance of Gompers with Gary and Mussolini through the American Legion, to the program of class collaboration, and to the campaign of expulsions, splits, and general violence launched against the adherents of the Red International of Labor Unions. It may be confidently predicted that, with the new revolutionary wave sweeping over Europe, with growing unemployment and economic crisis facing America, that the intensifying of the class struggle and the growing power of the Red International with the rank and file, the American fascisti will soon be a reality, that it will have an unexampled clutch upon the throat of labor, and that its record for violence and brutality will vie with that of the classic exponents of fascismo in Italy. And that's the end of the audiobook. I thought that this was a really good article. It's a good rundown of exactly the kind of pre-depression institutions, that is to say, pre-crisis, where capitalism would really start freaking out and going after any kind of socialist revolutionary effort, just as Browder described. And as he ended on the note of class collaboration, that's actually the subject of the next video, in which we're going to present 3 short articles by Browder on the topic of class collaborationism, specifically being against class collaborationism. So what do you think? Leave a question or comment below, and we will continue the discussion in the comments section as always. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and thanks to the current patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. You can sign up for just a few dollars a month or more, whatever you see fit. These donations are essential. This is a non-commercial channel, viewer supported, and these contributions allow me to spend more time on the channel than I'd be able to do otherwise. So if you like the channel, thank me, but also thank a supporter and consider becoming one yourself. Beyond that, whether you're a supporter or not, engagement counts, so like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, even if it's thanks, good video, or random letters. This will help to boost the video and the channel in the algorithm, and it will help more people to stumble across this content more easily. The channel has been growing steadily for the last 4 years. I have a lot more content planned, and as capitalism goes into probably another massive crisis in the next few years, we definitely want to deliver this into the hands of as many working people as possible. And finally, agitation and education can be done online, at least in part, but remember that the third piece of that slogan, agitate, educate, organize, the organizing, that happens in real life. So take this education into the real world with you by applying what you've learned here in the struggles within your local left organizations, whether it's your city or your state or your region or a national organization, intensifying the class struggle and lessening the dependence of working class organizations on imperialist parties like the Democratic Party. We really need to increase the political independence of the working class, and that's one of the major tasks before the US left right now. All right, thanks again, and we will see you in the next video.